Maybe it's not worth stealing. Hello and good evening everybody, welcome to another live stream here on the Outdoors Station. And how has people been enjoying the streams this last couple of weeks? Have you enjoyed the ones with the dehydrators, or the ones with the numerous one or two stoves, camping stoves I happen to own, as well as obviously Ellie and the mental illness, and talking to Russ about his trip or his return back from the PCT. I hope people have been enjoying them. So first of all, welcome everybody that is here. Who's in the chat room? I can see Nick on Dartmoor. Hello again, Nick. You've been a faithful viewer, I think, since we started. Dave Irwin, welcome aboard. And who else? Lorca M. And that's all I can see at the moment, but I'm sure many more people will be joining us as we progress. Of course, the second people to welcome are the people who are watching this in the future. Welcome to you as well, and hope you enjoy these series of live streams. We'll be doing a whole variety, all related to outdoor activities, things to keep us interested and stimulated while we're all in lockdown at the moment. Now, we are talking tonight to the author David Lintern and his book, recent release book that was released towards the end of last year called The Big Rounds through Cicerone Press. And at some stage later on in the show, we will be doing a competition, a live free giveaway. Very, very simple. Just we'll give you a text number, and we just want you to send your name and a town to the text, just a usual simple text rate. And then David will pick a number, and we can then send you a book later on in the week. Now, David Lintern is an award-winning photographer. He's a writer. He describes himself as an average mountaineer and a below-average runner. He moved to the Cairngorms some years ago and writes about the uplands, conservation and teaching outdoor photography. He's the editor on Outdoor Enthusiast magazine, feature writer for TGO magazine, Walk Highlands, Sidetracked, Trek and Mountain and many others. Good evening, David.
Hi.
You are welcome. You're welcome. It's good to have you here. How's everything treating you up in the Cairngorms at the moment?
All right, yeah, you just narrowly missed my kids, or they narrowly missed you. So they're this is their bedtime right now. So that's
bedtime.
Quite funny. I thought Kellen was going to make an appearance, an impromptu appearance.
I could see them just before we came on there. I saw them coming in, and you were doing the panic dad moment. But it's all right. If they appear, they appear. They're welcome to join in and see Dad's famous moment.
It would be quite funny.
So the Big Rounds, yeah, lovely book. Enjoyed having to scoot through it. Fantastic read and very interesting with the whole range of information you've got in there. It's not just a guidebook, obviously, but rather than me tell people about it, why don't you tell people about it?
Okay, so yeah, it's a massive part of my life for a really long time. I started, I guess, well, I first looked at, I first had an inkling of what might be involved in 2013. And then, as you mentioned, it finally got published 2019. So from end to end, it's 6 years. It's probably, strictly speaking, it's probably 5 years in writing and production. It's a big subject. Those people who are sort of invested in these fell rounds, they kind of started really as fell rounds, so fell running rounds, or hill running rounds in the case of Scotland. There's a sort of a nomenclature difference there, but basically they started as running rounds. The book is directed both towards runners and walkers, because when I started this, I was absolutely not a runner. I used to run in secondary school as a way of getting out of football, because I was absolutely hopeless at football. So, but yeah, I run a little bit now, but I wouldn't even now really describe myself as a runner. I jog around places. So yeah, it was a really big part of my life for a really long time. The 3 rounds that are involved are the people who run them describe them as challenges. So and the runners that have them in their sights, if you like, are they're usually looking to do them in 24 hours or less. Now, for me, there's no way I'm going to be looking to do any of these rounds in 24 hours or less. But it's for the readers to kind of work that out themselves. We can look for 24 hours, or we can look for several days. And so the book's kind of structured in a way, hopefully, that means you can use it for a 24-hour challenge, or you can use it over several days as a sort of, if you like, as a walker or a backpacker.
So to give somebody an idea what a round sort of traditionally is then, I mean, the brief description is the 3 most challenging long distance mountain rounds. So we have a round in the UK, one in Wales and one in Scotland. And these peaks, are they all of a uniform sort of length, or is it just literally people over a period of time have linked together famous routes or favourite routes and turned them into something that really is a major challenge?
It's kind of different in each case. So in the case of the Bob Graham Round, which is the Lake District Round or the Cumbrian Round, as the name, basically each round's named after the person who kind of devised it, or kind of, may or may not have run it in completely for the first time. Bob Graham ran the round, the Lakeland Round, for the first time. There's a whole bunch of history that comes before Bob Graham, though, that's fascinating and that I've included in the book. So the idea of a challenge, a sort of a multi-peak challenge, that within a day or less is actually, for as long as people have been enjoying going into the mountains, there's been crazy people trying to do things, further, faster, longer, if you like. So, however, so each round's different. And that's, of course, part of the beauty of it, is that you kind of, if there's a UK round, an English round, a Welsh round, and a Scots round, they're a great introduction to each of the kind of some of the really beautiful mountain areas in each of those countries. But they've kind of got, to an extent, they are, there's a common thread. So, you're looking at around about, more or less, 60 miles, and around about, more or less, 8,000 meters of ascent. So, I mean, that's give or take. There's some variance between the 3 rounds. So it's about an Everest worth of ascent, obviously without the altitude, and around 60 miles, give or take. So that kind of gives people a ballpark. So that's, for people who, I mean, I'm assuming that most of your viewers will, they'll have some sense of what that means. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
And if, and certainly, I think one of the things that's kind of interesting in the world that we live in terms of media, is that we're so used to seeing people doing amazing things because there is so much media, there's so much social media, which is kind of quite a, it's kind of a good thing in a way. It's kind of a really amazing, people do amazing things all the time. But nevertheless, these are very kind of homespun UK challenges, the 3 of them, but they are still incredibly difficult. And actually, what I discovered is that they're incredibly difficult even to walk or backpack. That's hard work. And obviously, for the challenge for the walker or backpacker is very different to the challenge for a runner, because quite often you won't be recceing, you won't be kind of you won't have quite often people going in smaller groups or even solo. So you'll be navigating on site. You won't have someone to carry your kit. You'll be carrying multiple days worth of food and shelter and so on. So the kind of challenges are quite different.
Okay. So if I can just break in there, the book in itself then, although it's based around those 3 rounds, the approach to the book isn't purely for runners. It is catering for runners and and hikers and campers, backpackers, etc. But you also mix in there, I flipped through the book obviously and had a look at some of the detail. You've actually got quite a lot of information, a backstory in there. You've got various people that you've interviewed that have achieved great things and their comments on the actual rounds themselves, as well as practical Cicerone type information of where to go, where to park, where to stay, and that type of thing. Just to give us a brief confidence for the viewer that the book isn't purely for runners.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. I mean, as I said at the start, I still really wouldn't class myself as a runner. I came at this from a walking and backpacking kind of point of view. I was really interested in doing the rounds as backpacks, and that's what I've still done, obviously several times over now. So the books has the history of the rounds as running rounds, and has interviews with people who have run them. It also has, for example, there's a woman that I interviewed called Carrie Wallace, who did the round as, if you like, halfway between walking and running. So she did them as sort of multiple day challenges, so not 24-hour challenges. And then there's, for the likes of, for us, if you like, plodders, there's kind of suggested places to where you might get water. There's suggested places where you might even break up the rounds into kind of almost into sort of day sections. One of the things that I was really inspired by early on when I met Charlie Ramsay, who's the guy who formulated the Scots Round in Lochaber, was that he had this really nice kind of open attitude towards his own round. So although, he ran the round in, I think it was, he ran his round in 23 hours, 58 minutes or something the first time. I might be wrong by a minute or two. But one of the really nice things, he's got a really open-hearted attitude towards the Lochaber round, and him and his wife now do little sections. So they'll go and stay at Carrowa, and they'll kind of pick off little sections of his round as a way of kind of them going back and doing it as as older people. And his attitude was, come one, come all. These rounds of my round, if you like. My round isn't my round. The rounds are for everyone. And I found that really inspiring, and it kind of gave me confidence as well as a backpacker. I thought, oh well, this guy's done an amazing thing. People are running these rounds in the record now for the Charlie Ramsay rounds, like in the sort of 16-hour region.
Wow.
But it doesn't stop us doing the rounds over several days, or even over several years. You can go and do the memoirs in 2 or 3 days, staying in a B&B if you want. Why not? And so the book contains that kind of information as well. As you say, kind of quite practical, quite standard information for a guidebook to have, as well as the kind of, here's how you might do it as a multi-day route with everything on your back, self-sufficient for a week, as well as here's how you might approach it as a runner trying to do it in 24 hours or less.
All right, so there's a good mix there. Good mix.
Yeah, I had to be kind of straight up about it, and I think it's pretty important as well. Just I'm not that 24-hour challenge person, so I'm not going to write that book for runners. This is hopefully a book that will fit most people most of the time.
Right,
That's the
right.
idea.
I believe Rose is in the chat room as usual, and she's been keeping an eye on some of the comments. We're only on YouTube tonight. For some reason, Facebook was playing up, so I believe Rose has got a comment or two to mention there.
Yeah, hi everyone.
Hang on a second. Once again, I think I haven't pressed the button on your... Oh no, it should be there. It should be working.
Yes, the sound's going through. I can hear it.
Can you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Technical hitch there. Sorry, guys. Ross is a question for David. Do you think approaching this from the outside the fell running bubble affords you a different perspective on the rounds? Which I think is quite interesting.
Maybe. One of the things that was interesting early on about specifically the Bob Graham round was that, I guess, going back 5-6 years, you're looking at, things have changed quite a lot in that time. It's before all of Nicky Spinks's double rounds. And, a lot of the scene has become a bit more commercial, the fell running scene. I still think it's less commercial than a lot of other kind of outdoor activities. It's fair to say, without kind of getting into too much detail, it's fair to say that there was, I wanted to approach that really sensitively, and I was also aware that there were real hot spots on the Bob Graham round, and so part of what I wanted to do was, rather than, if you like, the first rule of Bob Graham Club being don't talk about Bob Graham Club, try and just give people some decent information, because there were issues. So if you take like the example of there's a changeover point, fell runners will know this. There's the changeover points for kind of where runners can get refreshed. Maybe they can change their pacing teams. They can kind of just change their socks, get some food down them. A particular hotspot for the Bob Graham round is Wasdale. And there are all sorts of kind of issues there to do with neighbours and actually erosion as well. There's a kind of a big issue on various points on the Bob Graham round. And rather than not talk about those, I think I kind of wanted to kind of just approach those and try and give people some information they can work with, and meet some of those issues face on. Those kind of issues that are less problematic on the Paddy Buckley, the Welsh round, and the Charlie Ramsay, although those rounds are becoming more popular as well. So, I've done quite a lot of work in the sort of conservation area as a journalist, and I moved to Scotland to work for the John Muir Trust for a while. So I was interested in kind of those kind of questions and how can you give people some decent info that they, rather than just trying to, the popularity of the Bob Graham round and the popularity of the Lake District isn't going away. So let's be straight up about it and try and so maybe that's a different approach to the one that could be broached by a sort of a hardcore fell runner. I'm not sure. It's probably not for me to say.
Okay.
But that's what I wanted to do with certainly with the Bob Graham round. It was, I felt that was quite important.
Okay, well, what I certainly want to do here is obviously get into a brief look at the rounds from a photographic point of view. You've got some lovely photographs I want to show. For people that are watching and want to know how we're going to run the competition, we'll be mentioning the details for the competition in about 10 or 15 minutes time. It's very simple. It's just a case of texting your detail through to a certain number, but I'll do that, as I say, in 10 or 15 minutes time. But let's actually get into some of these pictures and some of the stories associated with the rounds. I want to start, if possible, with the Bob Graham round. The imagery that I've got here, I've just got a slideshow of images that you sent me. So do you want to talk through these, or just talk through what the round is like generally when people are looking at these pictures?
Yes, I mean a lot of folk will know some of these scenes, I'm imagining. So basically what the round does is it takes, I'm going to just kind of sit with the book in my hand as well. So the first shot you saw there was on Jenkin Hill, that was just above Keswick. The round starts and finishes in Keswick. It starts at a place called Moot Hall, and you must start and finish in this place. That's the rules. The Bob Graham round is quite strict. It's looked after by a club. And the rules are, because it's been established for a long time, the rules are quite, they're fairly strict. And I don't mean that in a derogatory way. I think it's an amazing historical and cultural thing, and that's a big part of why I was interested in writing about this whole subject. So you start and finish in Keswick. You can go in either direction, but let's go clockwise. We go over Skiddaw, and then over the back of Blencathra, down Hallsfell Ridge, and and then there's a changeover point or a transition point at Threlkeld, and then people go over the I guess I call it the east ridge, so it's the Dodds. People will know it as the Dodds, and you can see it sort of. You can see Keswick there and on the screen, and there's Threlkeld kind of just to the northeast, and there's the Dodds, the kind of the line, the sort of basically a line south over those kind of great big rolling hills, and down to sort of Fairfield, and then we end up at a place called Dunmore Raise, which is just on the road just south of Thelmere, I think it is, and then you're up into the sort of high ground. I think we're on to the next bit of the map. There we go. Up into the high ground there, kind of, and over towards sort of Langdale. And I'll just sort of pause there and just mention that you'll see there's a few dotted lines. So there were points on each round where I kind of felt it might be useful to add in sort of alternatives. And that's sometimes to do with walkers or backpackers with kind of heavier kit, and sometimes to do with occasionally to do with erosion issues. So that's what the dotted lines are about. And then resuming my chat about where we are, you're going to go round Langdale, and which is just by the first sort of dotted line there in the middle of the screen, and up onto Bowfell, really beautiful route that the runners take up onto Bowfell, and then just the picture there is kind of just a little bit further round after Wasdale. But yeah, Scorefell Pike, and down into Wasdale, slightly sort of touchy transition point there, potentially, if people don't mind their P's and Q's, because the transition points, there's Wasdale. So the transition point, and there's another one of Wasdale. Transition point right by the campsite, so issues there in the past. And then up onto Ewbarrow, really beautiful section of the round, around sort of Steeple Pillar, which was that shot you saw earlier, and then Honister Pass, sort of Great Gable, Honister Pass, and then down the last sort of section. This is the Newlands Valley, and that's sort of the last bit of the round. But as I said, you can do it in either direction, but you must start and finish. Don't get any funny ideas, guys. You must start and finish in Moot Hall in Keswick. And you also, for the Bob Graham round, you also must be accompanied. They ask that you are paced, partly to do with safety, and partly to do, partly just so that you've got a witness to say that you have done it. And it's by far the most popular round. I don't know what the numbers are currently, but it's in excess of 2,000 people have completed it in 24 hours or less. And of course, the folk who've completed it as a multi-day backpack, or indeed in sections, aren't recorded. Those folk are, will be in there many thousands. So that's the sort of a Bob Graham in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's great.
And it's if you like what's great about obviously it's a crazy running challenge, but it's also a really amazing grand tour of some of the really best bits of the Lake District. So it's, by no means is it the complete Lake District, as most of your viewers will know, but it's a pretty good overview of some really fantastic hills.
The most spectacular spots. Right, well, if that's whetted your appetite then, folks, this is the competition. This is the telephone number. It's just a small mobile I've got sitting on the desk here. It's just a standard UK text. So if you want to just text your name and your nearest town, it's only open to UK entries only, just because of the postage issues, if you don't mind. And you must be in the chat to win it at the end of the show. I will ask David to choose a number. So by all means, text that at any stage. Rose will be dropping the number occasionally into the chat room, so you don't forget it. But if you just text your name and where you are in the UK, we will have a chat with you later and get that shipped out to you towards the end of the week. Right, well, let's just go back to Paddy Buckley then, and do the Paddy Buckley round. Let's just call up, get the pictures there. So I'm just going to get the front page up, David, and then ready to go for your
I'll just
detail.
Through that image that you've got on the screen there. So it was amazing to meet Paddy. We'd been in kind of email conversation and finally got to meet him. by the time I'd sort of done all the rounds at least once, or certainly sections, 2, 3, 4 times in some cases, took a while to meet. He's based in Morecambe now. That's him in his home library. He's got the most incredible home library. It's his entire loft, all climbing and hill walking books. And he's got, this is a lifetime's worth of outdoor enthusiasm, and an amazing guy. Such a pleasure to meet him. And the first shot of him, that was his hands, and he's holding what are called the Pantlenny record books. So that's where him and friends would record their attempts on what became the round named after him, Paddy Buckley, but aka the Welsh Classical Round. Now, what's definitely really important to mention at this point is that Paddy didn't run his round as a complete round for the first time himself. It was actually run first by Wendy Dodds. And of course Wendy's in the book as well, and that was a key person to speak to as well. So that was just to explain, and it was just amazing to see those books when I went to meet him at his home, to see the written in their hand at the time. And Pantlenny, incidentally, was the name of the holiday cottage where he and some members of the Rucksack Club, and it was Chris Brasher's holiday cottage in Snowdonia, and that's where they would kind of base themselves, and they would thrash out the round. Where would it go over Cribgoch or not was a big sort of point of contention, and Chris Brasher, apparently not being a very good climber, suggested that it shouldn't, and it should take the route that we'll now discuss. Sorry, Bob, I'll shut up and let you get into them.
Not at all.
Such an amazing thing to see for me, to see those, having read so much, having walked obviously to meet the guy, but then to see that, to see the handwriting, and it's a real amazing historical document that. Anyway, there we are.
Okay, well, let's have a look at the map then, and we'll drop in some pictures as after you give us a brief look at the map.
Okay, so the Welsh Classical, or the Paddy Buckley Round, is a little bit different to the Bob Graham, in that Paddy doesn't insist that you run it in 24 hours or less to be recorded, but rather that it's he records the 24 hours or less, but it's not as strict, if you like. He also doesn't insist that you start from a particular point. He says you can start from any one of the transition points, or in fact any point on the round, and you can go in either direction. So it's quite a lot looser. It's got a sort of a slightly more anarchic feel. And that's just his style. That's just the way he and also it's to do with the way that he did a lot of the research in conjunction with some of his friends, and certainly with Wendy. And as I said, Wendy ran it first, and I think she took something like 25 and a bit hours. I can't remember the exact time. Obviously it's in the book. Anyway, so the way way we look at it in the book is we go clockwise again, and I've started from Capel Curig. A lot of folks start from Llanberis. From Capel Curig, it has an advantage because you can then resupply in Llanberis if you're doing it as a backpack. So that means you're carrying less on your back. Anyway, so we'll go from Capel's, which is I think it's a previous map. Sorry, Bob. There we go. So Capel Curig's there on the right, sort of around about 3 o'clock, and you go up onto. Just forgive my pronunciation of some of these. It'll get worse in a minute when we go to the Scots round. So you go up onto Mol Siabod, or I'm not going to try Siabod, and you take what's called the Boundary Ridge, which effectively connects the sort of Ogwyn Valley with the Molwyns and the hills around Blaenau Festiniog. So then we flip onto map 2, and the Boundary Ridge is it's a really tough way to start, but gives you this amazing view over the sort of Snowdonia Massif, which is effectively on the left of that picture at the moment. So we flick to the next bit of the map now. Don't know if it is there. Yeah, there we go. So there you can see Blaenau, and you can see the hills around, or to the left of Blaenau Festiniog there. Really amazing. Goes through some really incredible industrial landscapes as well. That's what I found really. It's kind of a mind-blowing sort of aspect to the Welsh Round, is that you're travelling through industrial heritage. So the mines above Blaenau are slate mines. It was, I think, the mine was originally called Rossid, and you go right through it. And yeah, there's a picture of some of the architecture that you're seeing at Rossid, and there's some amazing history as well. That's kind of, I've included sort of where I can. I've included bits and pieces of that in the book. From those hills, you go over Connect. And then down into a little sleepy settlement just south of Bedgellet called Nampmore, and then up onto some really a lot quieter hills over on the west there. You can kind of see there just where the compass sign is, just on the left there. You can kind of see hills like Bryn Banog, and that's a really beautiful part of the Round, just because there's a lot fewer folk on it. And you end up on Igarn, Trimidiscal, those hills, just where you kind of end up, just sort of to the north there. One of the things that's interesting about the Welsh Round is it kind of seems to subdivide a bit more easily for walkers and backpackers. And actually, you could, in the book, I've tried to address. It's possible to do the Welsh Round almost and do it as almost with a B&B every night. So that, for those folk who aren't interested in racing around, there are ways to do it as in a more stately pace. Anyway, so from that western ridge, you cross the road and you go up onto Snowdon, take the south ridge onto Snowdon, and then some more kind of rolling hills into Llanberis, and then from Llanberis you're into some really amazing kind of another really amazing dose of quarry and industrial heritage. It's called the Donora Quarry, and the photos, this photo and the last photo you've just seen are from the hills just above that quarry. And then we kind of basically go from the kind of the Llanberis kind of valley system into the Ogwen Valley system, and there you can see, you can see the hills of Carnethau just there, and that's a shot of a guy who was on running on Carned Llewellyn, I think. A shot there that Bob showed just of the kind of the old shoe that's taken in a at Dinorig, and it's taken in a place called the Caban, and there you go. And you can see basically the Caban was as a place that, I mean, if anyone climbs around Llanberis and climbs Slate, they'll know this place because it's used now as a bivvy spot for climbers. It's where the miners used to get out of the weather when they had their lunch, and climbers and whoever else is wandering around in the quarry now, they'll quite often, if they find a relic from that time, they'll quite often leave it on the bench there. So it's a really evocative place. So again, the Round as we walk through it in the book does visit these places. Even though runners might choose not to loiter, I felt like it was really important to kind of acknowledge some of the history that we're going through. Anyway, so up from Llanberis through Dinorig, up onto the Gliderau, which will be known to probably most of the viewers, and then down into the Ogwen Valley via Tryfan and up onto the Carn Ethel on the other side, on the north side of Ogwen, and then back to Capel. So that's that round in a not so much of a nutshell. There you go, Snowdon at dawn. It was nice to go back. It's kind of where I cut my teeth, really. Snowdonia when I was living in London, and used to race off, try and get out of town at sort of 5 before the traffic got too heavy. So it was great to go back and kind of to look at it all again. Most of the hills I'd been on before, but it just kind of join them all up and look at it all again with new eyes.
Yeah, it looks fantastic. Okay, so just to remind people again, if you want to enter the competition, the telephone number Rose is posting in the chat room on YouTube. So by all means, just send me a simple text. All I've got is a little bog standard phone here, and David will choose a number towards the end of the show, and we will give you a free book. The wonderful Big Rounds book is what we're talking about, which is being described as the 3 most challenging long-distance mountain rounds. We've also got questions coming in, which is great, so thanks very much for sending those in. If you could just put a capital Q in the front, what I'm doing is I'm gathering the questions and we'll fire those at David at the end to see if he can answer your particular point. So now let's go on to the Charlie Ramsay Round, and just call up the pictures for those. Now, is there a bit of a story with Charlie Ramsay as well? You met him and had a chat with him for the book as well.
Bob, I'm just going to put a light on. Charlie's amazing. What an amazing character. He's just full of life, still full of life. Got such a zest for life, and is so enthusiastic about the folk who are kind of coming to fell running and walking and backpacking as well. So meeting Charlie was really, for me, was kind of the catalyst, I think, for the book. The backstory to that is that he'd seen a photo that I had published in the Great Outdoors magazine, and he got in touch, I think via a website or something, and he lives in Edinburgh, and I just moved to Edinburgh at the time. The Charlie Ramsay Round, his own round, was 35 years that year, so we met for a bit of a chat. And did just a tiny piece in TGO to kind of to mark that, and then I had a crack at it and failed dismally. Didn't manage to complete the round. Even as a walker, I kind of ran out of time and steam, and then just kept on going back. And the fascinating thing, I think, for me, the thread that ties the book together really is people. And the fascinating thing for me when I finally sort of got under the skin of all this is the history behind it. Charlie and Paddy are friends, and of course they're fell runners, and they actually met on a Bob Graham attempt. They were pacers for Chris Brasher. Well, actually, Paddy was attempting the round himself, and Charlie was kind of. I mean, the full story is in the book, and then he talks about it in his talks as well. But Charlie was kind of found himself there almost by accident, and he wasn't press ganged at all, but he thought he was just there for a bit of an evening run up Skiddaw, and it turned out Chris Brasher kind of fell back, didn't complete, and Paddy stepped away as well, and it ended up being Charlie Ramsay that ended up running the full Bob Graham round. So, and then the story goes that when they're sitting around in the evening at dinner, Chris Brasher, being Chris Brasher and very ebullient and kind of a charismatic kind of media, kind of Cambridge type, invited everyone to dinner, and Charlie brought the family, and the story goes, Chris Brasher said, "So, what's the Scots version? Have you got something like the Bob Graham round in Scotland?" And at that point, Charlie got to thinking and working and tinkering with another round, a round in Lochaber called the Tranter Round, named after a guy called Philip Tranter. And effectively, if you see that map there, if you take out the section to the right of Loch Treig there, the big body of water on the right, if you take that away, more or less, that's effectively the Tranter Round. So it's basically all the moors on the south side of Glen Nevis there, and then the Grey Quarries and Ben Nevis. But then if we get into it in just a bit more detail, Charlie doesn't insist that you go in any particular direction. He does insist, though, that you start and finish at Glen Nevis Youth Hostel. So that is the start and end point. And the way I chose to talk about it in the book is the way that Charlie ran it, again, because of just for purely historical reasons. We go up onto the moors, which includes kind of, again, many viewers will be familiar with a lot of this terrain. Basically, just do the entire ridge. So it includes things like, you go out and back on Sgurravan and so Ring of Steel, kind of Binion Moor, Binion Beg, excuse me. There's one of two stop bands on there, and then you're on to Sgurraleida Moor, down to what Charlie calls the valley section. And then, so just there, that photo there just previously was a shot of a bit of the Ring of Steel, and there's my mate Mick. You can just about make him out, sort of bottom left. We're just heading down towards a camp. So it's amazing terrain. And for me, as someone new to Scotland in, whenever it was, 2013, when I first looked at, it wasn't the first time I'd been up onto those hills, but the first time I'd looked at the round completely. It's
mind blowing, isn't it?
Yeah, it puts a lot of the terrain in the Lake District sort of in it's slightly, the terrain's rougher, more challenging than a lot of the Lakeland Round, although it has to be said, the Score-Fell bit of the high ground, the bit between Bowfell and Score-Fell is pretty burly ground too. So anyway, we're along to the moors, we're down into the valley section, and then we head towards Loch Treig, and then we do the sort of the Treig Munros, which are really remote. That's just, that shot there is just looking toward, that's over the moors. Excuse me. The Treig Munros, then you're down to a changeover point at Furset, or a transition point for runners, and then up onto what they call the Isians. So there's Stubcar Isian, and then sort of adjacent to Larry Bothy, and then the second stop band, Grey Quarries, then you've got the Sanach Moor, Anach Beg, and then up onto the route takes us via the Carmore Jerrigaret, up onto Ben Nevis. So it's a really, really nice way to finish, and then down the kind of, if you like, the standard tourist path to the youth hostel. It's worth pointing out that a lot of runners do that in reverse. It's considered to be a bit quicker. That shot there, that was just, I lucked in or lucked out. I never know which way around that is. I happened to be, I was doing a bit of support for a guy called Joe Williams, who has, as some people might know, is related to the Williams family who runs Cicerone. So Joe was doing his round at the same time as Jasmine Paris there on the left was attempting to beat the record at the time, and they just happened to be there on the same weekend. They started within half an hour of each other, so that's at about 3:30 in the morning. And I asked nicely if I could take photos and document it, and There's Graham Nash there on the right, very well known fell runner, and Charlie there in the middle. Charlie, as I said, he's got such a zest for life with all this, and he still comes out and does support when he can. So he'll meet people halfway round with cake and that kind of stuff. And so anyway, that was nice to mark that. But yeah, as I was saying, Jasmine did actually run it in an anti-clockwise direction. But quite often runners will run it in a clockwise direction just to get the really high ground out of the way first. There's an interesting debate to be had about which way walkers or backpackers might do it. The other thing that's worth saying for people who are on a multi-day journey is that you've got a weather window to think about. A runner's weather window need only be 24 hours or 30 hours, say. But obviously, for folk taking a week or more or less, you really want to make sure you've got nice weather when you're on the Ben. Certainly, when you're on the Carmore Jerrigaret, you don't want to be blown around too much. So, all of these things are worth. They add to the challenge, and they're complex things to do in one go, whether you are walking or running. There's no doubt about that.
Well, there's certainly spectacular countryside, aren't there? The views are marvellous. Marvellous. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you very much for all the questions which are coming in, which we'll come on to shortly. So if you do have any more questions over the next few minutes, please get them in there, because there's a 30-second or so delay between what I'm saying now and you picking it up on YouTube. So we'll come on to the questions in a second. But what I'm going to do is just put a little video up of what the next stream is going to be about on Friday. Our next live stream is this Friday, the 17th of April at 7 p.m. with Lisa Cutcliffe, a wild foods expert and foraging instructor based in Leeds. She's going to be telling us what to look out for in the hedgerows during our daily permitted walks, and you might be surprised by what spring offerings are very close to your home currently. Watch the stream on Facebook and YouTube, and do join in with the conversations and questions in the chat room. So that's 7 p.m. this Friday, the 17th of April. Make sure you click the subscribe and reminder buttons, and we'll see you there. Sorry, David, could you just tell us who this chap is on screen now? Sure.
So the last chapter in the book it contains some interviews. So this is a guy called Jim Mann, who I think he still has the winter round records for all 3 rounds. It may have changed recently. I may get caught. If people know differently, if I'll hands up, I'll be happily be corrected. Jim, he's an amazing athlete. So what I did when I was looking for interviews, obviously it was important to speak to Paddy Buckley and got to know Charlie reasonably well over the years. Obviously super important to have Wendy in the book, and so just such an honour that she could add her experience to the mix. But otherwise, I was looking for folk who knew most or all of the 3 rounds. So, there were so many people that would have been amazing to have included in the book. But effectively, I was looking for folk who had experience of all 3. So, as I mentioned, Jim has the winter round records, or certainly had the winter round records until very, very recently. And so that's a very particular skill. I would not suggest, and he certainly doesn't suggest, that most people are looking to do these rounds in winter. Certainly not as runs, and as I mentioned, as backpacks, they'd be,
hard going,
as challenging in a very different way, because of weather and so on and so forth. So that's Jim Mann. Otherwise, you've got folk in it. I've mentioned Wendy. You've also got Jasmine, was very generous with her time. Jasmine Paris, who was until very recently the Charlie Ramsay Round record holder. That's Nikki Spinks, who many people will know, who has the record for all the doubles. It was brilliant to meet her. That's her in her kitchen. She'd forgotten I was coming and was mucking out her cows. So yeah, she's just brilliant. Also an interview with okay, so you've heard about these rounds, right? So these 3 big rounds, imagine running them back to back as a continuous challenge with only a car journey rest in between. So somebody's actually done that. There's only one person who's ever done it. The name of the guy is called Mike Hartley. So he gave a short interview as well. It kind of beggars belief, really. And I've also mentioned a young woman called Carrie Wallace, who now runs a women's fell running kind of guiding business in Lochaber, based out of Fort William. So Kerry's in the book as well. As I said, with a slightly different perspective on. She did hers as a multi-day sort of running stroke walking challenge, and actually used bed and breakfasts and hotels in some cases, and kind of she broke it up in a different sort of way. So I thought it was kind of fun to have her contribution as well. Yeah. She's got a really different take on it. Really good points to make around weather windows and doing it over a longer period of time.
Well, that's great. I mean, it's obviously, you've got a heck of a lot in there. It's a very full book, and you've well explained very clearly that you're catering for the runners as well as the backpackers and day walkers and people who want to do it in sections. Naturally, if people want to buy the book, as opposed to win the book in our competition tonight, the Cicerone is a fairly good place to start. They have got the book there, and obviously I think David will have a few copies as well if you want to contact David himself directly. But let's come on to a few questions. Let me just set this up and let us send these through and see what people say. So Ross Brannigan, what was your most memorable moment in relation to connecting with the landscape whilst recycling the rounds? Recceing the rounds, sorry, couldn't quite read my own screen.
So hi Ross, I know Ross. Hello. Man. I guess Ross will know some of the backstory to this. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's several years worth of work. So it's sort of all this stuff, a bit like for many of the fell runners, who are going to undertake these challenges or are going to eye up these challenges. They end up being they just get embedded into your life, and so there are. I guess it's what's interesting is that I've got the way memory works is kind of interesting in relation to landscape, isn't it? So I've got really kind of pin sharp memories of being up on the Mamors Stogban. The first time I tried for the Charlie Ramsay Round, and just at sunset. And then when you kind of go back subsequently, I've probably been on that round, I've been on those hills at least, most of them at least half a dozen times now. So your memories overlay, and then of course, meeting some of the folk who, have made their name fell running. After those, after you've been on those hills, I've got really great memories of being on, just kind of kind of goofily cheering on Jasmine as she was coming up onto the Esians, with Finlay Wilde and John Gay, who were pacing her at that point. And I think I said something really daft, like "Yay!" So and I remember John smiling, kind of wryly, "Who's this fool?" With the big camera. So then again with, as I mentioned earlier, with the Paddy Buckley, it was just really great for me personally to kind of go back to, I guess, my old stomping ground, and kind of just see it with completely new eyes. And I think one of the things that's really amazing in terms of landscape is that these are continuous lines. So where certainly in relation to the Lake District, I found that really, again, I found it quite a unifying thing to do, is to do the whole line. Even as a walk, it's to do the whole line is really amazing, because what happens is that all those bits, those little hills or little glens or valleys that you've visited as, maybe in a car or by public transport or on bike, you kind of join it all up together. So it becomes a really, it becomes a unifying thing to do in terms of, a continuous walk or a continuous run.
That's great, because that actually leads us on to the next question from Finchy615. Which rounds or couple of sections are the most easily accessible by public transport for backpacking?
From memory, right? Okay, so so my caveat is, and I'm not doing a hard sell here. Caveat is that all of that stuff's in the book. From memory, a couple of things just pop straight into my mind. It's pretty straightforward to do the Mamors by public transport, in and out between kind of Kinlochleven and Fort William. So there's a bus that kind of does that road. And you can kind of base yourself in either of those towns, and kind of effectively knock off the Mamors, if you like, based in those two places. And certainly the lakes and the Welsh Round, the Snowdonia Round, are easier still. So if you look at the Bob Graham Stage 1, so that takes you over kind of Skiddaw, Great Calver and Blencathra. Again, I've done that on public transport, and you can add bits in as well, which is really nice. You can kind of do, add some scrambles in, and then you kind of, when you get round to the Dodds, you can do quite a lot of that from Glenridding. So kind of just base yourself there. And I mean, it's kind of a different approach, and it's one that I look at specifically in the book. Is, you could treat the Bob Graham as a sort of almost like a 10-day luxury B&B walking holiday with added scrambles, and kind of, for international visitors, when we get past the situation we're in now, if people were coming for a couple of weeks, you'd have transport time, but then you could kind of do, support our local B&Bs, which I think they're all going to need the support, right? So can kind of do it in that sort of way, and it was kind of fun to sort of break it down in that sort of way, and even though I really got a lot out of doing them as I said, as continuous lines, it was sort of also quite fun to sort of, if you like, take Charlie's inspiration, Charlie Ramsay's inspiration, and say, actually, let's what happens if you base yourself at Corral Bothy? Why not? That's kind of make it ecumenical. Let's make it let's break it down and approach it in that way.
Okay, excellent. Well, just to remind people that the competition is going to be closing now. So if Rose, you could just post the telephone number, again, text number into the chat room on YouTube there for people if they want to have a last minute entry. Got a good handful of entries, so we'll ask you to pick a number in a second. But let's go on to the next question from the Flying Sprout. What was your best day out on all the rounds? I suppose that's weather related, is it?
Yeah, partly. I mean, yeah, it's, as I said, it's the sort of, I took way too long doing this book, so there's lots of good memories, lots of kind of painful bits as well, like sort of lying on a track thinking I've broken my ankle wasn't too much fun at one point. Probably though, the one when I saw that question come up, I suppose go with your first instinct. The first time I tried the Charlie Ramsay Round, as I mentioned, I didn't make the whole round, even as a backpack. What I did was I kind of cut out the Lochaber hills, and I effectively did the Tranter Round, the Philip Tranter Round, and that was also the first time that I'd been up on Ben Nevis, and it was also the first time that I wanted to do Ben Nevis by the Carmore Jerrigaret. So that's just me being a kind of a purist and kind of wanting to go by way of like a really nice line. And so, yeah, that day I camped at there's a bialach just between the Annex and Carmore Jerrig. The ridge up onto Carmore Jerrig itself is really nice. I was up onto the summit of Carmore Jerrig by about 8 a.m. I started quite early. I'm a bit lazy in the morning when I'm camping. And so, yeah, and then I was across onto the Arret, which is just a really beautiful way to get up onto Ben Nevis. So that's a standout day for me. It was something I'd waited a really, really long time for. And obviously subsequently done it since a couple of times, and it's but it was first time was really special.
Okay. And from John Middleton, we're just wondering how long the Bob Graham round takes for an average backpacker, 5 or 6 days. I think you just said 10, but that was probably with doing B&Bs, wasn't it?
Yeah, kind of half in jest. You could do it as definitely if you were to do it as a sort of a luxury trip with B&Bs. I better not say it because there'll probably be some expedition group suggesting that next year or the year after. The first time I tried the Bob as a continuous round, and this is with me knowing not all of the hills, but most of the hills. It took me 6 days. I had a stinking head cold at the time, so that was my excuse. Folk now, I think the record now, Ross will probably have the exact time, but I think the record now is it's Killian Johnny has the record, and it's somewhere between 11 and 12 hours. But and I took 6 days. So this is the sort of range of athleticism and experience that we're working between. In the book, I have loose 6-day itineraries for each round, and obviously for runners, you're looking at working towards a 24-hour or less challenge.
Okay, and the final question there from Ross again. Of those who interviewed in the book, whose story captured your imagination the most?
It was really nice to meet Paddy. Paddy's quite low key. So it was really nice to sort of meet him. I think part of this for me is about kind of, Bob Graham's quite a well-known name. Well, I don't know if it's he's quite household, but he's certainly well known. So part of this for me is kind of these guys alongside Wendy they've made these really they've made a really big cultural contribution. I think so. Part of the book is about honouring that, marking that. So it was really nice to meet Paddy, and I also think the other person that I haven't mentioned is Helen Whitaker, who I haven't met, but she is in the book. It's a brief interview in the book. So it was really great to get her in. I think she's just accomplished some incredible things. And meeting Jim Mann Jim is an incredible athlete. Jim Mann is the photo, the guy there with the tree behind him that you saw earlier. Jim also holds the record at the moment for the most Munros in 24 hours. and the record stands at 30 Munros and a pint. So he had a pint in, I think it was the Braemar Arms at the end there. So yeah, he's the Winter Round record holder. He's done some amazing things, but he's so, just completely down to earth guy. He's doing some really great work at the moment. They have, I'm going to paraphrase the name of the Twitter handle, but I think it's something like trees instead of teas. He basically suggesting that, instead of a race T-shirt, the race organisers, fell race organisers, you contribute towards tree planting instead. Obviously, this is all off the cards for the time being because of lockdown, but once the races get going again, I thought it was a really nice initiative that he started.
Lovely. Okay then, David, well, we've had our hour now, so thank you very much indeed for your time. I just need you to pick a number between 1 and 25, please.
17.
Okay, just bear with me a second. Talk amongst yourselves. 17. And so we have 17th message from Danny Nichol. Danny Nichol, are you in the chat room at the moment? Do say hi and type a note to Rose from Hull. But it looks like you are the winner of the free book, the Big Rounds book, with the author, David Lintern. So I hope you're there. I know there's a bit of a delay before that comes through, but we'll contact Danny anyway. So thank you very much indeed, David, for your time this evening. It's been a good chat. You've gone certainly into great detail on the book. Thanks to everybody that's taken the time to tune in and watch. I hope you've enjoyed it. We're trying to mix and match all these different streams every time and do something slightly different. As I say, the next one on Friday is with a wild food specialist, a forager, and hopefully she's going to show us a whole variety of things that to look for in the hedgerows. And then next week we've got something a little bit special as well with another author who's done a very interesting and unique adventure. So thank you once again, David, for your time. I do appreciate it. And on that note, folks, stay tuned and we'll be back on Friday at 7 o'clock. Bye for now.